Hey friends, welcome to another episode of Generation Tech. And today we are going to be asking the question, which is a better show, The Orville or Star Trek Discovery? Now, during the lead up to the release of both of these shows, which came out at roughly the same time, many Star Trek fans said that they were most excited about the release of The Orville, a comedy space odyssey created by Seth MacFarlane.
Lieutenant Commander Bortus. Your entire species is male, isn't it?
That is correct, sir.
Probably not a lot of arguments about leaving the toilet seat up and that kind of thing, right?
Now, based on watching the first 4 episodes of each of these shows, and there will be some minor spoilers in this, I can tell you that if you're a fan of the classic Star Trek series like The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Star Trek Voyager, and you weren't so keen on the JJ Abrams reboots, then go watch The Orville. It really captures the essence of that classic Star Trek style from the TV shows from the 90s and the early 2000s. And it's funny too. You know, Star Trek The Next Generation wasn't devoid of humor itself.
Captain, I do not think it is appropriate for a Starfleet officer to appear naked.
Oh, come now. Big, handsome, strapping fellow like you? What can you be afraid of?
But alas, the only humorous part of Star Trek Discovery is the abbreviation of its name, STD. The Orville, meanwhile, is hilarious and creative in its scenarios in a way that Star Trek probably couldn't be because it was at least trying to be a serious show.
Sir, I wish to request a leave of absence.
For what reason?
I have laid an egg.
But it also has just as much of the moral questioning and philosophical discussion as the earlier prime timeline Star Trek series did. And why is this? Well, in my opinion, this is at least in part because Seth MacFarlane actually hired Brannon Braga, who'd worked as a producer and writer on Star Trek The Next Generation, Voyager, Enterprise, and the Next Generation movies, to be his executive producer. Star Trek Discovery, meanwhile, is mostly a list of new names. One of the 2 co-creators of STD, Brian Fuller, does have a few writing credits on several Deep Space Nine and Voyager episodes, but Alex Kurtzman, the other co-creator, only worked on the JJ Abrams Star Trek movies. Thus, there is no one senior who had producer or executive producer credits on the classic Star Trek series working on Star Trek Discovery. So what does that mean for the show? Well, Star Trek Discovery, whilst having amazing visuals and special effects, is a darker, more dramatic show featuring less likable characters and a story that often seems like it was written by people who just don't get what Star Trek is about. It's a serial, which means the story is told over the course of the entire season, whereas The Orville, like all previous Star Trek series before it, is pretty much episodic in form. Each episode is a self-contained story with the occasional 2-parter. Discovery also chooses not to tell the story of the entire crew from the very beginning. At the start, they basically just focus on the story of one character, Michael Burnham, who, despite her name, is a woman. And this is super distracting. Like, why does she have a dude's name? I mean, you'll be watching the show and then suddenly someone calls out Michael and you're like, wait a minute, who's Michael? And you're like, oh yeah, she has a dude's name. And then you like missed 10 seconds of dialogue or something because you were thinking about that. There's no need for it. The Orville, meanwhile, introduces all of the characters from the very beginning and the ship. It reminds me in many ways of the beginning of the first episode of Star Trek Voyager.
It's not bad, right?
No, it's good. You paint some flames on the side, maybe like a rainbow unicorn, you got something.
Even the opening credits are very similar. In older Star Trek series, the whole crew is important. You always had those posters with the entire crew on them. And they were given close to the same amount of screen time, with perhaps the captain just getting a little bit more. But in Star Trek Discovery, we're basically just following the story of one character. And she's not even likable. She behaves like an unhinged, spoiled child who thinks she's always right despite her lack of experience.
It would be logical for you to take into account my success rate during our 7 years together and execute my plan without further challenge before we're dragged into war.
Starfleet doesn't fire first. That's all, number 1. We have to.
She then assaults her captain and attempts a mutiny in the first episode.
You're relieved, Mr. Saru.
Where's the captain?
I provided her with Klingon intel from a personal source on Vulcan. She's passing it to the Admiral. Weapons. Slot a pair of photon torpedoes in the tubes, and computer firing solution targeting the neck of that Klingon ship.
And that's another feature of Star Trek Discovery that makes it a little hard to watch at times. They break Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry's rule that the main characters should get on pretty much harmoniously with each other most of the time. The crew in Discovery argue a lot. In fact, I would say pretty much 90% of the conversations in the first 4 episodes were arguments.
I taught you better than this. We don't start shooting on a hunch, and we don't take innocent lives, period.
Really? We're running drills near Klingon space.
We are at war, Lieutenant. I'd appreciate a day going by without me having to remind you of that.
Well, Captain, I will need to take a team with me. You know, for the cumbersome, annoying science part.
Wait, why are you sedating it?
I'm gonna lop off its claws so you can figure out what makes this thing so good at killing Klingons.
I do not think that's a good idea.
And this makes the show just feel repetitive and predictable. CBS's decision to have Michelle Yeoh in the first 2 episodes, with Burnham serving as her first officer on board the starship Shenzhou, is a little bit strange to me. It seemed that they did it to make the show more attractive to Chinese audiences. The name Shenzhou is the name of real-world China's actual space capsule. And with China owning half of Hollywood these days, in other movies there are endless out-of-place Chinese product placements. No! In this series, it's more of cultural placement. You have the captain of the Discovery dishing out fortune cookies, and the captain of the Shenzhou quoting classical Chinese texts that now even aliens seem to recognize quotes from.
All warfare is based on deception. When you're able to attack, you must seem unable.
Sun Tzu. I recognize the quote.
The Orville does a pretty good job of making fun of Star Trek's fascination with quotes.
If the stars should appear one night in 1,000 years, how would men believe and adore and preserve for many generations the remembrance of the city of God?
Is that Shakespeare?
Emerson.
William Byron Emerson, yes, yes.
Ralph Waldo.
Ralph Waldo, Lord Ralph Waldo Keats, David Thoreau, yes.
And now my final rant about Star Trek Discovery, the redesign of the Klingons. How did they go from this to this? In other Star Trek series, there are several characters, notably B'Elanna Torres in Voyager, who were half human, half Klingon. For that to happen, a human had to sleep with something that looked like this. Or for you guys, here's the female version. Can you imagine that happening? At least the earlier Klingons looked kind of human. They had hair and eyebrows. They just had those forehead ridges and never visited the orthodontist. The new Klingons also speak Klingon for all the conversations amongst themselves, and those are some long scenes of reading subtitles and listening to a language that isn't that easy on the ear. It sucks. And you wonder why we're subjected to this. It seems the creators of the show had a message. They wanted to model the Klingons after their particular view of, wait for it, Trump supporters. As if there's something new and innovative about bashing President Trump. Their slogan, Remain Klingon, supposedly echoes Make America Great Again. CBS, of course, denies it. Don't worry, CBS, it went completely over my head until I read about it online. While watching the show, I just felt there was something forced and unnatural about the Klingons in Discovery. Speaking of things that feel forced, the fact that the show starts off with a female captain and female first officer was a little bit strange to me too, just like the all-female reboot of Ghostbusters. It seems like the creators of Star Trek Discovery were trying to push a message with that too. But most sci-fi fans are male. You can just look at the analytics of the fans of this YouTube channel to see that. In the past, we did have Captain Janeway in Voyager, but she was so good that I think even if you were a sexist who didn't want a female captain, you would still respect her. Kate Mulgrew just did such a great job of making that character seem wise and authoritative.
You can try and stop us from getting to the truth, but I promise you, if you do,
I will respond with all the unique technologies at my command. Janeway out.
She's probably my second favourite Star Trek captain after Picard, and her being a female didn't come at the expense of weakening any of the male characters in the show. But in Star Trek Discovery, the first human male Starfleet officer we see is this guy, who's a complete pansy and has to come to Michael for help when he's scared.
Why are we fighting? We're Starfleet. We're explorers, not soldiers.
Connor, you took a blow to the head. Activate that comm panel and call Dr. Nambu.
Yes, I need help.
We do eventually get a strong male character in the form of Captain Lorca in the 3rd episode, but he's not a positive character. He's more like the warmongering Admiral Marcus in Star Trek Into Darkness, rather than a Starfleet captain with wisdom and moral integrity. There's no positive male role model for us guys to look up to. But there is in the Orville, and guess what? There are strong female characters too, so strong they can rip open metal doors with their bare hands.
Door's jammed. Alara, you want to open this jar of pickles for me? I loosened it for you.
Guys, I'm tired of prequels and remakes. It's time Paramount got its act together and gave us a Star Trek TV series that starts off after Nemesis and Voyager ended. Perhaps with a Captain Riker or Captain Worf commanding the Enterprise E, why not bring 7 of 9 along to replace Data and Tom Paris to be the hotshot helmsman? With modern special effects, it could be an incredible show. Well, it won't happen soon, but until then, we have the Orville to get our fix of classic Star Trek plotlines and character development. I want to congratulate Brannon Braga on working so hard with Seth MacFarlane to make this show such a success. It must have been soul-destroying to see JJ Abrams ripping up the rulebook on the show that you'd worked for so many years to develop. But you've done a great job and filled a void in the hearts of true Star Trek fans. Thank you. And that's where I'm going to end today's episode. Guys, if you want to watch The Orville, it's on Fox on Thursdays, and if you want to watch STD, it's only available through CBS's infuriatingly glitchy app. In case you're wondering, I am planning on watching the full season of both shows, but I do get much more excited about The Orville each week. What do you think about all this, guys? Leave your comments below. And if you could have your Star Trek dream team, any crew put together on any ship, who would they be and which ship would they command? Leave your comments below, guys. Subscribe if you're new, give this video a like, and if you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.